welcome once again to our discussion on the Brahma Vimohana Leela, the pastime of the bewilderment of Brahma. We had just come to a very interesting point in the discussion before we all dispersed for lunch prasadam. And that point was that Balaram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, also did not know what was wrong. He knew there was something that was not quite right. He had been observing for some time that he was also feeling the same affection that he had for the other cowherd boys as he was feeling for Krishna. He was also noticing that the gopis had the affection for their own sons and for the other boys as they did for Krishna. So he was wondering what is going on. And then one day a certain incident happened. This was about 5 or 6 days before the completion of 1 year after Brahma had kidnapped the calves and the cowherd boys. Now you'll remember that the day on which Brahma did this was the birthday of Balaram. So he wasn't present there. Had he been present there, he would have known everything. But he wasn't present. So then, one day as he was there in the forests of Vrindavan, he saw that the older cowherd men, they had been grazing their cows on top of Govardhan hill. And below, not too far away, they saw the calves who were being tended to by the boys, the cowherd boys. Now these calves were not the newest of calves. These cows who were grazing up on Govardhan hill also had newly born calves. But these calves who were grazing at a distance at the foothills, they were somewhat older than the newly born calves. And they had been weaned off their milk, so they were now grazing on grass and they didn't need the mother's milk. But when these cows saw their calves from the top of Govardhan hill to the foothill, something happened to them. They felt such a surge of affection in their hearts for their calves. They ran down at breakneck speed. You know, when you're running downhill, it's quite dangerous. Running uphill is not dangerous because you pause anyway because you're tired. You can't run uphill too much, so you won't run too fast. But when you run downhill, then the momentum gets you and you can lose control and slip and fall and hurt yourself. So these cows began to run. And how did they run? That's being described by Shukadev. Just listen to this description and we can imagine what must have gone on in the minds of the cows to run like this. When the cows saw their own calves on the top of Govardhan hill, they forgot themselves and their caretakers, which means the Brajabasis, the Gopas, because of increased affection. And although the path was very rough, they ran toward their calves with great anxiety, each running as if with one pair of legs. So you can imagine the situation? They have 2 pairs of legs, right? You've seen how cows walk? Or if they run, have you seen a cow running? Or a bull? They 2 legs at a time. The front, the back, front, back. But here, they were going as if they were hopping, just as if they had only 1 pair of legs. And even that they were doing it on the way down. You can imagine, yes? Their milk bags full and flowing with milk, their heads and tails raised, and their humps moving with their necks, they ran forcefully until they reached their calves to feed them. Generally, the calves and the cows are fed separately. They graze separately also. But this time when the cows saw the calves, they couldn't hold themselves back. And they reached the calves and they started feeding them milk. And the calves reciprocated. And although they were beyond the age for drinking, but they still started drinking the milk of their mothers. So the cowherd men, meanwhile, they were helpless. They tried their best to stop the cows from running down. It was plain dangerous, number one. They could have fallen down, injured themselves, killed themselves. And they didn't want to go there, for the cows to go there, because they were grazing separately. So even though these experienced, strong cowherd men tried to hold the cows back, but they utterly failed. And because they couldn't do anything, they were helpless, so they got frustrated, they felt humiliated, and they felt angry. Because generally they prided themselves on on being able to look after their cows and controlling them very well. But this time they were just not able to control the cows. And the cows went straight down. Then the cowherd men also ran down the rough path because they had to control the situation below. So they also ran down, although the road was very rough and it was risky, but they nevertheless took the risk and they went there. And when they came down, what did they see? They saw their own sons there, right? Because the calves were being tended by the boys. The cows were being tended by the grown-ups, the gopas, the cowherd men. So when these men came down and they saw their boys, they immediately lost all their anger, their frustration, their sense of humiliation. And they immediately went up to their boys, their children, they embraced them and started petting them, and they forgot everything else. And here was a situation where the cows were with the calves, these men were with the boys, and Balaram was watching all this. And as he saw this exchange of affection between the calves and the cows and the boys and the men on this side, they saw even the cowherd men, who were generally very strong, they were crying tears of joy. And Balaram was wondering, what's going on here? Because these men were so overjoyed to see their boys. So then he began to consider Balaram. Balaram is very intelligent. So he considered, what's happened here? And then he decided, what is this wonderful phenomenon? Kim etat adbhutam. What is this wonderful phenomenon that I see here? The affection of all the inhabitants of Vraja, including me, towards these boys and calves is increasing as never before. Just like our affection for Lord Krishna, the super soul of all living entities. Now, this increase of affection was not obviously because of the usual maya that traps ordinary conditioned living entities. Maya can trap only those who are not devotees of Krishna. And here we have associates of Krishna, for whom Krishna is their life and soul. And what about Balaram? Surely Balaram can't be influenced by Maya. So what is happening here? Keyam va kuta ayata devi va naryat utasuri. Who is this? And where has she come from? Is this some demigoddess? Is it some lady? Is it some demoness who has come here and is bewildering everybody like this? So Balaram was analyzing the whole situation. Said, no, it can't be any of these, because how could I be bewildered? None of these can bewilder me. So this must be some special energy or potency of my dear brother Krishna. So therefore, there is something very mystical about this exchange of affection that I'm seeing here. It is definitely not demoniac. It is not ordinary material illusion. And then Balaram was able to see what had happened. By his mystic eye, he understood that all the calves and Krishna's friends were actually expansions of Krishna. And then he decided, okay, so now I have to deal with this issue. So he went to Krishna and he said, my dear Krishna, these boys I earlier thought were probably great demigods who have joined you in these pastimes. And these calves, I thought they were probably great sages like Narada who have reappeared here to participate in your pastimes and to serve you. But now I realize I was mistaken. These boys and these calves are you. So what's going on here? What's happened? Please briefly explain everything to me. And then Krishna explained everything. Balaram's question is, why have you expanded yourself? Balaram figured out that Krishna had expanded himself, but he wanted to know why. Then finally, Krishna explained everything. Of course, because Balaram wasn't present that day, so he wasn't aware of it. And then once Balaram was aware of everything, then he was satisfied. Another 4 or 5 days passed away. Balaram didn't reveal the secret to anyone. It was a confidential discussion between the two brothers. And then on the exact same day on which Brahma had kidnapped the cows, 1 year later, Brahma came back. And this was again Balaram's birthday. So he didn't come again. So he missed the first day's activities of 1 year ago, and he missed this also. Meanwhile, Brahma decided, it's been a moment by my reckoning, by time measurement on my planet, it's only 1 moment, but by calculations on the earth, it's 1 year. So let me see what's going on here. What's happened in Braja? I have kidnapped the boys and the calves by exhibiting my mystic potency. So let's see what's going on there. Now, Prabhupada gives a very interesting purport here. Brahma came back to see the fun caused by his stealing the boys and calves. But he was also afraid that he was playing with fire. Krishna was his master, and he had played mischief for fun by taking away Krishna's calves and boys. He was really anxious, so he did not stay away for long. He came back after a moment of his calculation. Brahma started getting nervous. What did I do? I'm playing with fire. I wanted to see the fun, but now I realized it was a blunder. I shouldn't have done it. It's a big, big mistake. And then he came. And when he came, what did he see? I have kidnapped these boys and the calves and kept them in the cave. And I'm sure they haven't risen. But now when I come, I see that Krishna is with these boys and with the calves, and they're moving around, the calves are grazing, the boys are playing with Krishna as if everything was normal. Whatever happened to those boys and the calves who I hid in the cave? So he went to the cave and he saw that the boys and the calves were lying in slumber inside the cave. Then he came back and he saw the boys and calves were with Krishna. He went back to the cave. He saw the boys and calves were in slumber there. He came back. He saw the boys and calves were with Krishna. Now, you've heard the expression that your head starts spinning when you come across something, and see Brahma has 4 heads. So all his 4 heads must have started spinning in bewilderment. What is going on? How come there are 2 sets of boys and calves? I can't understand this. The most intelligent person in the universe has got bewildered. I'm sure I kidnapped them and they kept them there. They are there. So are they false? And is this set of boys and calves real? Or is this set false? And have they been manufactured by Krishna in my absence, and those are the real ones? Or are both of them false? So he was trying to understand. Or maybe what Krishna has done is, every time I go to see the cave, before I reach there, he transports all the calves and the boys into the cave. So when I reach there, I see them there. When I leave the cave and come back to the forest, very quickly, Krishna transports the calves and the boys to the forest. Is that what's happening? So Brahma was standing for a long time trying to analyze the whole situation. And the more he analyzed it, the more he got bewildered and could not understand what was happening. So who are these? Where have they come from? And thus, having been thoroughly baffled by Krishna's mystic potency, he could understand the greatness of Krishna. He could see that he had tried to use his insignificant mystic power to bewilder him who is the master of all mystic power. In Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna has been addressed as Yogeshwara. He's a yogi, but he's the controller and the master of all yogis. All the yogic potencies ultimately reside in Krishna, and whatever yogic potencies and powers are available in the world and visible, they all are also coming from Krishna. So when one tries to use one's mystic power to bewilder an exalted personality, if someone has very tiny power, and with that tiny power he or she tries to bewilder someone with a lot of power, then it boomerangs. And the person who tries to overwhelm the other person gets defeated, actually. And this is what happened to Brahma. Shukadev Goswami says here that Krishna is the one who mystifies the entire universe. How could Brahma possibly have thought that he could have mystified Krishna? But nevertheless, such is the nature of this material world that even an exalted personality like Brahma can sometimes take such decisions. And in this connection, Srila Prabhupada tells a famous story from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was spoken by Mahaprabhu himself, of Brahma once visiting Dwarka. When Brahma came there, he came to the doors of the palace, and he said, I want to see Krishna. My name is Brahma, and I'm the creator of the universe. So please give this information to Krishna. So the doorkeeper went to Krishna and says, Mr. Brahma outside, waiting outside. So Krishna said, okay, please ask him, which Brahma is it? So when the doorkeeper came back, the doorkeeper said, Krishna wants to know which Brahma has come. So then he was puzzled. What does it mean, which Krishna? Which Brahma? Are there many Brahmas? Let's say, we get a message in the temple saying the Prime Minister is coming. The Prime Minister of England. We say, which Prime Minister of England? But there's only one Prime Minister, isn't it? So Brahma was surprised because there's only one Brahma in the universe. So why is he saying which Brahma? So he said, I tell him that the four-headed Brahma has come. So then he went there and Krishna called him and he went. The moment he entered the room where Krishna was, he was astounded. What did he see? He saw millions of Brahmas. He saw millions of Indras. He saw millions of Lord Shivas. And not only that, the Brahmas that he saw were huge in comparison to himself. Our Brahma of our universe has only 4 heads. And there were Brahmas with 10 heads, 100 heads, 1,000 heads, 10,000. 100,000, million, 10 million heads. I don't know how that happened, but how we could accommodate. We have a problem enough with one head. Even Brahma managing 4 heads, it's quite a task. And imagine with thousands and millions of heads. And all of them offered their obeisances to Krishna at the same time. And there was a huge clanging sound as the metallic helmets touched the ground in obeisance. And they all said, "My dear Lord, we have come here to offer our respects to you. Please protect us and always keep us under the shelter of your lotus feet." And Krishna replied, "You have nothing to fear. I will always be with you. Now, how is everything going on in your universe?" And each of them replied, "By your mercy, everything is going on well." And then Brahma gave them, and Krishna gave them permission to depart. And they all left. Now, another extraordinary thing in this event was, none of the Brahmas, none of the Shivas and Indras knew that anyone else was present. Each Brahma thought he was the only Brahma present there. Only our Brahma with 4 heads was watching this whole panoramic scene. He was seeing this, and you can imagine how baffled and bewildered he must have become. And then all these Brahmas left, the Shivas left, Indras left, everyone left. And then Brahma understood the position of Krishna, because Brahma must have got a little proud. So Krishna wanted to show him what his true position was in comparison to himself. So that's what the position is. There are unlimited universes in the material world. Every universe has a Brahma, has a Shiva, has an Indra, Chandra, Varuna, and all these demigods. And our universe is only a middle-sized universe. It's not even a big universe. And so our one Brahma is just one amongst millions and millions of Brahmas, and many of whom are much bigger, much more intelligent, much stronger than our Brahma. This is the enormity of the scales of creation. So this story illustrates the exalted position of Krishna and how everyone is insignificant compared to Krishna. As Brahma was looking at this, he was thinking, "My God, what's happening here?" And then, at that time, something happened again. As he was reflecting on his position, he thought, "I'm like a firefly, a glowworm, who looks very pretty, looks very attractive at night, and everybody appreciates the glowworm. Because the glowworm dispels the darkness of the night, it looks very nice. But in the daytime, once the sun has arisen, no one looks at the glowworm." What is the power of the illumination of the glowworm with respect to the sun's illumination? Similarly, Brahma felt, "I'm like that glowworm. So long as I was not in Krishna's presence, I could imagine or I could feel that I was something great, something special. But now that I'm in front of Krishna's mystic potency, I realize how utterly insignificant I am. What is the value of my mystic potency?" When Brahma looked on, having this realization of humility, and in front of his very eyes, all the cowherd boys and the calves transformed. And what a transformation it was. Each of them transformed into a 4-handed Vishnu form. And each of them with bluish colored complexions, golden colored clothes, and bedecked with all sorts of flower garlands and other embellishments. And Shukadeva Goswami describes what they were like. We can imagine now Brahma standing there, and he's gazing at what he thought was the cowherd boys and the calves. All those personalities had 4 arms. holding conch shell, disc, mace, and lotus flower in their hands. They wore helmets on their heads, earrings on their ears, and garlands of forest flowers around their neck. On the upper portion of the right side of their chests was the emblem of the goddess of fortune. Furthermore, there were armlets on their arms, the kaustubh gem around their necks, which were marked with 3 lines like a conch shell, and bracelets on their wrist. With bangles on their ankles, ornaments on their feet, and sacred belts around their waists, they all appeared very beautiful. This is a description of the 4-armed forms of Narayan or Vishnu in the Vaikuntha world. Now, you see, those who live in Vaikuntha have the opulence of Sarupya Mukti, which means that their forms resemble identically the form of the Supreme Lord. However, there are 2 differences. The Supreme Lord has the mark of the Srivatsa, which is a lock of 1 curly hair actually, white hair, which represents Lakshmi Devi, which is on his chest. And the second is the kaustubh mani, the jewel that he wears. These are the only 2 distinguishing marks by which one can understand the difference between the Lord and his devotees in Vaikuntha. So Brahma was aware of this. So when he saw the Vishnu forms, he saw the mark of Srivatsa, he saw the kaustubh jewel, and he understood these are the forms of the Supreme Lord. Every part of their bodies, from their feet to the top of their heads, was fully decorated with fresh tender garlands of tulasi leaves offered by devotees in worshipping the Lord by the greatest pious activities, namely hearing and chanting. Those Vishnu forms, by their pure smiling, which resembled the increasing light of the moon, and by the sidelong glances of their reddish eyes, created and protected the desires of their own devotees as if by the modes of passion and ignorance. So when the Supreme Lord glances at his devotees, he fully satisfies them. And by their mercy also all the desires of the devotees are fulfilled. The pure devotees of the Lord have no material desires. They only have spiritual desires, Krishna conscious desires, and Krishna fulfills them as well. And then he saw that all these 4 forms, these 400 forms, were being worshipped by different types of living entities who had taken different forms. They were also being worshipped by all sorts of other energies at his disposal, because the Supreme Lord is the supreme energetic. And there's no meaning to energetic without having energies, inasmuch as there's no meaning to the sun without sunshine, or fire without light and heat. So all these energies, innumerable of them, were all at his side, attempting to serve him in so many different ways. And Brahma was blessed with this vision. And these powers included the time factor, samskara, and svabhava, nature, karma. All of these things were there. And Brahma was observing this in wonder. It was like some magical display that was going on. And the most intelligent entity of the universe just was rendered completely speechless. And this way Brahma's wonder knew no end. And then he saw all the calves and boys as Krishna's expansions. Shukadev Goswami says, by the power of the effulgence of those Vishnu Murtis, Lord Brahma, his 11 senses jolted by astonishment and stunned in transcendental bliss, became silent, just like a child's clay doll in the presence of the village deity. So picture for a moment what was going on with Brahma. Very picturesque description. his 11 senses jolted by astonishment and stunned by transcendental bliss. What is this, he thought, and then he was not even able to see. At least earlier he was able to see what was going on, and then after some time he lost his sight. He couldn't even see what was going on. This is the extent of Brahma's bewilderment. And he could understand, even though he was Lord of Saraswati, who is the goddess of learning, goddess of education, that his position was totally insignificant. And as Brahma stood there, he opened his eyes with great difficulty. And as he opened his eyes and his consciousness revived, he stood up like a dead man coming back to life. Then he saw the universe coming along, or along with himself. He had this vision. Then Brahma saw the whole of Vrindavan, the beautiful trees, the birds, the animals, the bees. Shukadev Goswami describes the beautiful state of Vrindavan as in Krishna's times. Actually, many devotees, when they go to Vrindavan, especially when they're from the West, and even those who are in India, before they go to Vrindavan for the first time, they have read Krishna book, they've read the Srimad Bhagavatam and these descriptions of Vrindavan, and they go there expecting to find something exactly like that. And when they actually land in Vrindavan, they find all these rickshaws and commotion and chaos and all sorts of noise and pollution and dust and what have you. And they are in for a culture shock. They say, whatever happened? We thought Vrindavan is always full of, cuckoos and touchstones and desire trees and Yamuna, cows and pure devotees everywhere. But this is the Vrindavan in Krishna's time. It is also the Vrindavan that exists now. But that Vrindavan needs spiritual vision to be seen. If one goes to Vrindavan and lives an ideal life, even if it's for a few days, then Krishna will reveal this to us. Vrindavan is the transcendental abode of the Lord, where there is no hunger, anger or thirst. Though naturally inimical, both human beings and fierce animals live together in transcendental friendship. And then Brahma saw the absolute truth. Assuming the role of a child in a family of cowherd men and standing all alone, just as before, with a morsel of food in his hand, searching everywhere for the calves and the cows and the cowherd boys. So now everything was back to square one. So as he saw Krishna there, as if he was just going around, as he was 1 year ago, he was with his, in both his hands carrying the yogurt and rice and a little fruit, and he saw Krishna like that, wandering around. And when Krishna saw Brahma, who is this? Who was this golden colored man, so big, 4 heads? Now he was back to his cowherd boy, Leela. Yes, no longer the supreme personality of Godhead. He's a cowherd boy. And Brahma watched, he was still on his swan. The swan was at a height. Then he disembarked from the swan carrier. He came to the ground and offered his full prostrated obeisances to Krishna. Normally, when demigods come to the earth, they don't touch the earth, the surface. They're usually 6 inches above the ground. Sometimes they come to the association of devotees to participate in kirtan, katha. You never know what disguise they may take and come. The devotee next to you may be a demigod coming in disguise. But they just check, test. If they're 6 inches above the seat, then then they're demigods. If they're not, then they're just your normal fellow devotees. So this time Brahma touched the ground because it was a holy land of Vrindavan. He offered his complete prostrated obeisances, dandavat, and it looked like a golden rod. Vat means like, danda means a stick. So to fall flat, when a stick falls, it just falls down and is flat. So Brahma offered dandavat, which means he fell down flat. And because he's golden complexioned, so it appeared as if a golden stick had fallen down. So Brahma hastily got down and offered this obeisance and touched the lotus feet of Krishna with the tips of 4 crowns on his head. And he bathed the feet of Krishna with water, with tears from his eyes, tears of joy. Rising and falling again and again, Brahma, who was now repenting, he was in half repentance, mixed feelings. He had repentance for what he did. At the same time, he was transcendentally ecstatic for what he had seen. This exhibition of mystic potency is not something that any ordinary person can see. So Brahma felt enormously blessed that he was privy to this very confidential vision. So he got down and then he started offering prayers. He rose very gradually and wiping his eyes looked at Mukunda and keeping his head bent low with folded hands. Then he started offering prayers. Suitably chastened, suitably being made aware of his own position and of the position of Krishna, Brahma's prayers represent complete philosophy. They represent all the siddhantas and all the conclusions that any devotee should know. It's also full with the sentiment of a devotee. Brahma begins by glorifying Krishna's beauty and the beauty of Vrindavan, etc. He also speaks about the mercy of the Lord, how fortunate he is that he has received the mercy of the Lord, and how the Lord is so merciful, and how without the mercy of the Lord one cannot attain anything. Especially spiritual realization comes only by the mercy of the Lord. He also prays, having now understood the glory of Vrindavan and of Vrajavasis, the residents of Vrindavan, he makes a very celebrated prayer. He prays that Krishna, please give me birth again as a blade or a clump of grass in Vrindavan, or maybe as an insect, because the dust of Vrindavan is so pure that I will get delivered by that process. He did not feel the courage. He did not dare to ask for a birth as a Brajavasi, Gopa or Gopi, not even a cow. He felt they are too exalted for me. What do I want? I want to be born again as a blade of grass, maybe a clump of grass, maybe an insect. And then when the residents of Vrindavan, especially the gopis, will walk all over me, the dust from the lotus feet will fall upon my head and I will feel blessed. In this way, Brahma concluded his prayers in the 14th chapter. Excellent verses, many, many important verses in those prayers. And after he finished the prayers, then he requested the Lord, my dear Lord, please continue, please forgive me. Lord Krishna considered Brahma his son and his devotee, so he forgave him for those offenses. And Krishna then went to the riverbank. He got the calves back exactly where they were 1 year ago. And he came back to the place where 1 year ago the cowherd boys had been eating, and they were also there. So the cowherd boys and the calves had been exactly where they were 1 year ago. They had not moved. By the mystic potency of the Lord, neither the cowherd boys nor the calves realized that 1 year had passed. They all felt that only one moment had passed. And none of the Brajabasis who came wandering into the forest at any time understood what had happened. They also were deprived of the vision of these cowherd boys and the calves over there. They could not see them also. So for the entire 1 year, these cowherd boys and calves remained exactly where they were. And after Brahma went back to his abode, after offering prayers, then Krishna was still with the rice and the yogurt and the fruit, and he went and he saw the calves. Okay, come, he brought the cows back, the calves. And he came back to his friends. All his friends felt jubilant. Oh Krishna, you've come back. You've been away only for a moment and we haven't eaten anything in your absence. So we're waiting for you. Come and join us again. And everything came back to normal as it was 1 year ago. And Balaram was also not present on this day, so he also did not understand what had happened. And then Krishna showed them the dead skin of Aghasura, which he had killed 1 year ago. And the boys thought it had just happened that morning. So for them 1 year had elapsed like 1 second. So when they went back home that evening, of course they had grown old, a little bigger in size, because 1 year had elapsed. Although they felt that only 1 second had elapsed, but actually they had grown 1 year. So they were all a little bigger than they were 1 year ago. So they went back home and they started describing the pastimes of the day. And in the course of that description, they narrated how Krishna had killed Aghasura, as if that event had happened on that very day in the morning. And this is how Shukadev Goswami explains how the gap occurred between the event of Krishna killing Aghasura and that news being revealed by the boys to the other residents of Vrindavan. So now, we are talking of 3 sets of calves and cowherd boys. One, the original set, who were exactly where they were, but nobody could see them, and they also did not realize that 1 year had passed. Then, there was a second set, the illusory boys and the calves who had been stolen by Brahma and kept in the cave. And then there was a third set, who was actually Krishna, and Krishna had expanded himself into all these boys and calves. So then, the mystic cows, the cows that were produced by by Krishna's mystic powers, who were hidden by Brahma, they disappeared. And then the real cows were there, and Krishna once again disappeared, the forms that he had assumed of the cows and the calves and the cowherd boys. He came back to he just withdrew that vision and that expansion. So things came back exactly to where they were 1 year ago. In this way, the residents of Vrindavan thought that Aghasur had been killed on that very day, which was the 6th year. And this was on Balaram's birthday. So this is the most extraordinary and beautiful narration of the Brahma Vimohana Leela. And Shukadev Goswami gives a Phalashruti. Phalashruti is the benefit that you get by hearing. Every particular pastime of the Lord has a Phalashruti. Every scripture also has a Phalashruti. Sometimes in order to attract materialistic people, this Phalashruti mentions maybe some material benefits, but not always. But in this case, the Phalashruti is very wonderful. Shukadev Goswami says, anyone who hears this narration about Krishna's killing of Aghasur, and of Krishna playing with the cowherd boys, and of Brahma's kidnapping the cowherd boys and the calves and Krishna's exhibition of his mystic potency and bewildering Brahma will attain the transcendental destination very, very quickly. So since all of us have heard this narration in these last few hours, surely we can be assured that Krishna's mercy will be upon us and we will one day attain that transcendental destination. So what we'll do now is we'll leave the floor open for questions, because several devotees came up to me asking certain questions. So I said we'll leave it for the question session. So regarding the Brahma Vimohana Leela specifically, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Yes. Do we have another mic, by the way? Okay, meanwhile you can ask and I'll repeat it on the mic.
Thank you, Maharaj. It was a wonderful narration. In terms of Krishna pardoning Brahma for the offense he had created, we also hear that there's a Brahma Sarovar where there's punishment. What we heard was that Krishna said, okay, I can pardon you, but the Vritvasis will have to pardon you, and then they gave them another punishment. And we also hear that he had to take the shelter of Surabhi cow, that I can't go in front of Krishna myself, please. Could you elaborate on those two aspects?
Yeah, well, you see, in Brajabasi folklore, there is a lot more to this. I did not mention some of these because it's not specifically mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes, in Braj, if you go around in Vrindavan, there are all these pastime places are there. There's a place called Chaumuha, where actually Brahma came and begged forgiveness. The place where he kidnapped the cow is a place where he came and begged forgiveness. That place is still, those places are still there. And of course, because he had committed this kind of offense, Krishna forgave. And then Brahma actually descended there and he repented with tears of repentance. And, then he understood the mood of Vrindavan. And in that way, his life became perfect. He is our Acharya. He is the beginning of the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya from him. So we should not think of Brahma as an ordinary person, even though he made a mistake. But even in pointing out the mistake that Brahma made, we have to be very respectful. So in Vrindavan and Braj, they have all these, shall we say, narrations about how Brahma repented and the Brahma Sarovar and all of that. So these are beautiful pastimes that happen. And when any of you come to Vrindavan, then you can also visit these places and remember this pastime, especially at Chaumuha. It's not too far from Vrindavan town, very close. Any other questions? Yes. 1 second, yeah. You can ask the question, I'll repeat it.
So Maharaj, we hear of Krishna expanding himself in the last Leela pastime when he interacts with each of the gopis, and also now here in Brahma Vimohana Leela, again expanding in different ways. So some commentators on the Bhagavatam have said that when Krishna expands in the Ras Leela, this constitutes Ashvarya, Ashvarya Bhav, Ashvarya potency, and so this doesn't necessarily happen in Braja. So one commentary was that Krishna was moving so quickly, like each of the gopis was with each of the gopis, actually was moving so quickly because this would constitute Ashvarya Ras. So how can we understand this in the context of the Brahma Vimohana Leela?
Okay, so a bit of a, shall we say, subtle question. The question is that some commentators say that Krishna's expanding himself into so many expansions to dance with all the gopis in the Ras Leela is an indication of the mood of opulence, which doesn't have place in Vrindavan. So probably it is that instead of expanding himself, he just moved so quickly amongst all the gopis that all the gopis felt Krishna was dancing only with them. But factually, the idea of the expansion is stated by our acharyas very clearly, so there's no doubt about that. Secondly, even if somebody were to move so fast amongst thousands of gopis that every one of them felt she was with him, that's also some exhibition of opulence and potency, right? It's not normal for anyone to be able to just move so fast amongst thousands that all the thousands feel that Krishna is only with them. So even that is an exhibition of mystic potency. The third point, very importantly, however, is when we say that Vrindavan is the place of madhurya, of sweetness, where there is no mood of awe and reverence, it does not mean that there is no opulence in Vrindavan. In fact, the opulence of Vrindavan is far greater than the opulence of Vaikuntha even. But the point is that in Vrindavan, that opulence is covered over by sweetness. The sweetness, the madhurya, is so pronounced, is so predominant that it covers over the opulence. So there is opulence, definitely. And as I mentioned, where was I saying that? Yeah, earlier today I was mentioning that it is precisely because Krishna has this opulence and still there is the exhibition of sweetness that makes the pastimes of Vrindavan so charming, so enchanting. So this is how we will reconcile the ideas of opulence and sweetness in Vrindavan. Okay? Someone else had a question there behind? Yes. Can you take the mic there?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the narration. I was wondering a bit of confusion because for the older gopis, was there one moment or one full year with Krishna? Because they heard first time from their own children about killing of Aghasur, or all the expansions of the cowherd boys when they went home as Krishna, they must have also told them what happened that morning, killing of Aghasur, or was it just once told to older gopis?
For the older gopis, one full year elapsed. And for them, they were able to serve Krishna, whom they thought was their son. And this went on for one complete year. And till the end of that year, they did not know about the killing of Aghasura. Because their son for that 1 year was Krishna, and Krishna kept mum.
Okay.
So it's only after that, when their original sons came back, and for the original sons, the 1 year had passed like one moment. So they didn't realize that 1 year had elapsed. So then they felt that Aghasura's killing had just happened that day in the morning. So they went back and excitedly told everybody that Aghasura was just killed this morning by Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay?